Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if what experts tell us about climate change actually changes what we believe? And if it does it matter for what we want to do about it? Today we're diving into a fascinating study that explores exactly that. It asks if hearing different kinds of experts talk about future global warming actually makes people change their minds, and what influences those changes. Imagine a world where experts give their best guesses about how much the planet will heat up by the year 2100. This research wanted to see what happens when ordinary people hear these predictions, especially when the experts themselves don't all agree. So, we know that climate change is a huge deal, and many people seem to underestimate just how serious it might get compared to what scientists say. This has led researchers to ask, how can we communicate this better? We've seen that telling people about the scientific consensus can make them more concerned. But what about when experts give specific numbers? Like how much the temperature might rise? Does hearing a prediction from a scientist versus a politician versus a business leader change things differently? And why this is super important, because how much we think the planet will warm influences how urgently we feel we need to act. To figure this out, the researchers brought in almost 2,000 people from across the United States. They started by asking everyone their own prediction for how much global temperatures would rise by 2100. Then they split these people into 9 different groups. Most groups heard a prediction from a specific type of expert: academics, policymakers, business leaders, innovators, researchers, and reformers. Or even an artificial intelligence system. One group heard from all of them at once, and another group just got some unrelated information as a control. The really cool part was a choice group where people got to pick which expert source they wanted to hear from. After hearing their assigned or chosen forecast, everyone was asked to make their prediction again. They also asked people how much they supported climate policies and how credible they found the source of information. So, what did they find? First, before hearing any expert predictions, people generally underestimated how much warming was expected. Their average guess was about 2.4 degrees Celsius of warming by 2100. This was lower than most of the expert forecasts, which ranged from about 2.2 degrees from policymakers up to 3.2 degrees from business leaders. Interestingly, people's guesses were closest to the policymakers who predicted the least warming. Now, did hearing these predictions change people's minds? Yes, in most cases, people did adjust their predictions upwards after hearing from experts. This shows that people do update their beliefs based on new information, which is sort of like how a smart system might learn. However, the amount people changed their minds wasn't always directly tied to how extreme the prediction was. For example, AI forecasts led to the biggest overall increase in expected warming, even though they weren't the highest projections. When the researchers looked at how precisely people updated their beliefs, meaning how closely they moved towards the expert's number, academics actually led the pack. Participants who heard from academics closed about 75% of the gap between their initial guess and the academic's prediction. This suggests that while AI might have made people raise their estimates the most, academics provided information that led to more accurate integration of that information. This is a really interesting distinction. One source might cause a bigger change, while another might lead to a more correct adjustment. What about the source itself? Did it matter who was giving the prediction? The study found that it did, but in a nuanced way. It wasn't just about whether people found the source credible. While credibility did play a role, it seemed to act more like a dimmer switch for how much people listened to the difference between their old belief and the new information, rather than being a completely separate driver of change. So, if you trusted the source more, you were more likely to adjust your prediction based on how different it was from what you initially thought. And what about letting people choose their source? Interestingly, people in the choice condition rated their chosen source as more credible. This makes sense, right? If you get to pick who you listen to, you are probably going to trust them more. The most popular choice was researchers and reformers, also. A surprising finding was that Republicans were 3 times more likely than Democrats to choose the artificial intelligence source. However, even though choosing a source made it seem more credible, it didn't necessarily lead to bigger changes in their temperature forecasts. Now, for the really big question, did changing people's predictions about future warming actually make them more supportive of climate policies? The answer here is a bit of a no. Even though people updated their climate forecasts, this didn't translate into increased support for aggressive climate action. What did predict policy support? Political ideology. This strongly suggests that while we might adjust our understanding of future risks based on expert information, our policy preferences are often more deeply tied to our existing beliefs, values, and political identity. So, what is the big takeaway from all this? The study shows that people's expectations about future global warming are pretty adaptable. When presented with expert forecasts, most people do adjust their predictions, usually upwards, to be more in line with what the experts are saying. This confirms that new information, especially from sources perceived as credible, can shift our understanding of future risks. It is like fine-tuning your internal weather forecast. We saw that academics led to the most precise updating, meaning people moved their beliefs in a way that better matched the academics' projection. AI forecasts, on the other hand, produced the biggest overall change in people's predictions, even if not always the most precise. This highlights that different sources can influence belief updating in different ways. Some might push beliefs further, others might lead to more calibrated adjustment. The finding that source credibility matters, but not always in a straightforward way, is also key. It suggests that our trust in a messenger doesn't automatically mean we'll fully accept their message. Instead, trust seems to amplify how much we weigh new information, especially when that information is different from what we already believe. The fact that people are more likely to choose sources they already trust, and that political identity can influence this choice, as seen with Republicans and AI, is also a significant point. It shows how our existing beliefs and affiliations shape how we engage with information. But here is the crucial part: even with these shifts in expectations, support for climate policy didn't budge. This is a really important limitation to acknowledge. It suggests that simply updating our factual beliefs about the future might not be enough to change deeply held political views or policy preferences. Our political ideology acts as a powerful filter, and climate policy support seems to be more rooted in that than in our specific predictions about temperature increases. This dissociation between belief updating and policy support is a critical finding for anyone trying to communicate about climate change. It means that, while we might be able to get people to better understand the science and projections, that understanding doesn't automatically translate into wanting to take action or support policies. The researchers suggest that perhaps abstract temperature numbers like 2 degrees Celsius are too far removed from people's everyday lives to spark action. They might need to be connected to more concrete emotional consequences like extreme weather events or health impacts. What does this mean for us? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, it's encouraging that people are open to revising their understanding of climate risks when presented with expert information. On the other hand, it highlights the challenge of translating that revised understanding into meaningful political action. It tells us that communicating the science effectively is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. We might need to focus on connecting climate projections to people's values, identities, and concerns in more direct and emotional ways to see real change in policy support. Future research could definitely explore how to bridge this gap. How can we make those abstract temperature changes feel more real and urgent, so they actually move the needle on policy support? It's a complex challenge, but understanding these psychological pathways is the first step. That's it for this week's Mind Lab. What do you think about these findings? Does it surprise you that changing predictions didn't change policy support? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please hit that like button, subscribe for more, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the fascinating world of psychology. See you next time.